The latest news, national issues, the political scene, and conversations with prominent personalities. All these firsthand at the forefront. OCTA Research conducted a Senate preferential survey last February that showed administration candidates still dominating the Magic 12. After the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte by Congress, surveys showed that Senate bets under PDP Laban have gained momentum. Will current developments on former President Rodrigo Duterte at the ICC influence voters' sentiment in the weeks leading to the May election? We have with us at the BNC studio OCTA Research Fellow, Dr. Guido David. Good morning, Dr. Guido.
And good morning to you, Attorney Karen, as always. And to the viewers and listeners here at BNC, good morning to everyone.
Let's talk about the recent key findings of the OCTA Research survey on Senate preferential votes. How did the candidates' rankings in this survey compare to the other surveys conducted by OCTA Research?
Well, we track it, and the most recent survey, Attorney Karen, was conducted February 21 to 25, I believe, around that range. And compared to the January survey, there were some movements, and you're correct that although in our survey, Congressman Erwin Tulfo is still the top choice of the respondents. We did see some movement with the other candidates, especially those with affiliated with the PDP Laban group, some upward movement. Now, I did notice that because I look at our own survey, but I also track other survey results because that's, generally as a data scientist, I try to take into account all the information that's available out there. And in some surveys, Senator Bongo is actually the top.
Yes, I noticed there was a survey where the data was also gathered around February.
Right.
So this was, I think, after the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. But there was one survey where Senator Bongo was number one.
Correct.
Which was, I think, something surprising for a lot of people because since last year, Congressman Erwin Tulfo has been consistently ranking number one in all the surveys. What do you think accounted for that change?
Well, in our own survey, Senator Bongo is number two. But the distance between Senator Bongo and Congressman Erwin Tulfo has been sort of narrowing the gap. And so it's actually surprising, a little surprising. I mean, personally, I haven't been seeing that many ads of Senator Bongo. I mean, compared to the other candidates. We know some other candidates have been flooding the airwaves.
They've really been, well, I suppose, spending a lot, or they have a lot of resources to have ads.
Right. But for Senator Bongo, he has always been running on the platform of the Malasakit Center. So I think that cuts across the different alliances and parties because we do know that the Filipinos now, I mean, their main concern is, has something to do with poverty, with food, with
So are you saying that the Malasakit centers have been effective in addressing some of the basic needs of Filipinos?
I think yes. I think it helps, and I think the public sees Senator Bongo as someone who's doing his job as a senator to help the people. So is it connected with the impeachment? Well, possibly the boost, because as you mentioned, and not just in our own survey, but in other data that we're seeing, that there has been a boost with the PDP Laban affiliated candidates, even down to some of the other lesser known personalities. We saw an increase in their numbers. So maybe
because we also have Jimeno, who's a PDP Laban candidate, but a first time in terms of running, a first timer as someone running for Senate, but he also increased in terms of his ranking in the Senate preferential surveys.
Correct.
Is it possible? I understand that when it comes to surveys, it's really just the voter sentiment captured at that very specific moment, the dates when the data was gathered. So there's no way to trace what caused a change, right? Because some of the factors I think that were present during the February dates that the recent surveys gathered the data from, the recent events at that time were the impeachment of Vice President Sara by Congress, but also former President Duterte was actively doing the rounds in endorsing PDP Laban candidates. So as a political analyst, scientist, do you think these two have any relation to that change or shift in voter preferences?
Well, our own one of our own probes about the endorsement power shows that former President Duterte still has a significant endorsement power. Possibly that endorsement effect that he has is not as impactful as it previously was. Maybe, if we compare it to 5 years ago, but it's still significant that he can still raise awareness for certain personalities and add to their numbers. If let's say he could add 5% by virtue of his endorsement, that's significant, and that would account for some of the increases that we saw. So maybe it's his endorsement power. Is it about the impeachment? That's something we have to see, because it's not clear to me as a data scientist looking at the data if that is having let's say a sympathy effect with the respondents or with the voters. But definitely, you mentioned Jimmy Bondoc, and there are a few others. I mean, Philip Salvador is actually already, in the thick of things. He's up to between 20 to 24%, I think, in our own survey. He's quite close to that number. So, So
would you say that Philip Salvador, since you mentioned him as someone gaining momentum, do you think now he's within that realm of being a possible senatorial winner?
He's not yet there. I mean, he's outside the magic 12 in terms of the margin of error, but he's within range. So, he's outside there, and if he gains additional momentum, it could happen. So I mean, the top 12 right now is very crowded. We have a lot of known personalities and new personalities who are known, incumbents, and also former senators with good track records. But Philip Salvador is definitely, I mean, he's around the same range as former Senator Gringo Honasan. And, Philip Salvador is just,
he's a newbie compared to Senator Honasan.
And even, like I said, Jimmy Bondoc and Attorney Vic Rodriguez is also,
because Rodante Marcoleta, looking at this recent OCTA Research survey, has also increased has gone up in terms of his ranking. I'm curious, when I hear the news and it says that admin candidates dominate the top 12, the admin candidates that I see were previously not affiliated with the admin or President Bongbong Marcos. Most starkly would be Tito Soto, who was a vice presidential candidate, along with Senator Lacson, who ran against President Bongbong Marcos. And then you also have in this top 12, Manny Pacquiao, who also ran against President Bongbong Marcos. So in terms of their ability to dominate the top 12, is it because of their affiliation with the admin, or is it because of their own personality and own star power?
Well, having the administration endorsement does help because, of course, the administration will have its resources available and also the machinery available, also on the local level. But I think a lot of the admin candidates, as you mentioned, Attorney Karen, are actually, I mean, they can stand on their own. And, some of them, I think, previously have had different alliances in the past.
Even Bong Revilla, Lito Lapid, Pia Cayetano. Well, Pia Cayetano also different. So is this a chicken and egg thing where as an admin, you also choose people who are likely to win so that it reflects well on the administration or the ability of the admin to endorse candidates? Meaning, if you choose candidates who are really affiliated to you but don't have a strong likelihood to win, then basically your endorsement power is seen as weak. And a lot of people say that midterm elections kind of reflects or is something that tests the power of the current president.
Well, that's a very interesting perspective, Attorney Karen, and I think you have very valid points. Whether the admin intentionally chose winnable candidates, I mean, I don't know as far as how their strategy goes, but definitely, if we look at the past affiliations of at least the political parties affiliated with the current administration. I mean, I only see a handful of names there. In fact, former Secretary Ben-Hur Abalos is probably one of the ones who are most affiliated with the admin in terms of an actual alliance. And the others have been, they've been in different political parties, let's admit it. I mean, former Senator Manny Pacquiao used to be in PDP Laban himself. So I think it's not surprising to see in the Filipino climate to have different, shifting alliances. And so what's important, I think, for the admin is that these people have shifted their alliance to the administration as of now. I mean, whether they'll be with the admin in the future, we have to see. It remains to be seen. And that's why, sometimes Filipinos will assess these candidates because of their shifting alliances. But at least as of the moment, they have, I think, I'm not a fly on the wall, but my understanding is they have at least sworn their allegiance to the administration for the as of the present.
Dr. Guido, I'd like to pick your brain on the chances of Senator Amy Marcos making it to the Magic 12, because right now she's polling between 6 to 16, and in some surveys she's even outside of the Magic 12. And she's the president's sister. They carry the same surname. So, what do you think accounts for that difficulty for her to rise in the rankings? And what pulls her down?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting case with Senator Amy Marcos because she does have the brand name. So our own survey showed that the Marcos brand also has an endorsement power. I think the concern is that a lot of voters and a big part of the public, or a part of the public, are confused as to where she stands on certain issues because she has been vocal, and at times she has not always aligned with the president's position on certain issues, and she has aligned with other parties or other personalities regarding issues. So I think that confuses some people, and in that regard, that's why her numbers, if we compare to last year, maybe 12 months ago or so, she was polling in the top 5 consistently, and now she's...
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. She was in the top 5 consistently last year.
Yes, last year. Not late last year, but I think early part of last year when we started conducting surveys for senators, she was actually in the top 5. So I think the fact that she's gone down means that I think she has to clarify where her position is, because even among, she still gets good numbers in the Ilocos regions, of course, Region 1, Region 2. But in other regions, her numbers have not been as consistent because I think they want to see some clarity as far as where she stands on positions.
Well, recently she's made statements that she was not in favor of the arrest of former President Duterte. I think she was even quoted as saying that she wants to call for an investigation as to former President Duterte's arrest. and then she did not show up in one of the Alianza rallies shortly after former President Duterte was arrested. As a political scientist, do you think this might show any difference in the next surveys if data were gathered after the arrest of former President Duterte?
Well, if she was gaining favor with the Dutertes by sort of allying with the Dutertes, that should actually help give her a boost, just like with the PDP Laban candidates. But I think on the other side of it, I think even from the supporters of the Duterte family, people, voters in Mindanao, where they are, strong, like, for example, Senator Bato, Senator Bongo, they're getting good numbers in Mindanao. But I think she's not getting great numbers in Mindanao also, because even the voters there are also confused. I mean, because my sense is that they're also not clear on if she's someone who's really on their side or not. So that's why they're not giving her the full support. Unlike, for example, let's say Senator Bato de la Rosa, they know that he's definitely on their side.
He did increase also in the rankings recently.
Right. So these people, some of these candidates are perceived as strongly with the Dutertes, but Senator Amy Marcos is not quite as strong. So that's the concern there. So she's not as strong with the Dutertes, and even with the Marcos, I mean, they're having some concerns about where she stands. So I think she has to clarify where she's at. Well, I think she's clarifying it right now, based on what you said.
But I think to your point, let's see how it's viewed by the voters, because like you said, really it doesn't matter what you say, it's whether they believe you.
Right,
that makes
exactly.
the big difference.
Exactly.
There are two other veteran legislators that also slid down. Senator Ping Lacson, in one of the surveys, he was even outside or at the border of the Magic 12. Right. And then Senator Pia Cayetano, also in the other surveys, have slid down. What do you think accounts for this change?
Those are, of course, very interesting cases. Senator Ping Lacson is a known personality. I think he hasn't been doing a lot of campaigning as much. So maybe he's not quite at the top of mind of the respondents in the surveys. I mean, I haven't seen an ad from him personally. So it will be interesting to see if he can regain that, that positioning within the next, 60 days, 2 months.
Yeah, oh my gosh, we have 2 months left before the elections. But why I find this interesting is because Senator Ping Lacson was even in the top 5 mostly in surveys since last year. So to see him in one of the surveys suddenly at the border of the Magic 12 was very surprising for a lot of people. As a data scientist, what normally could be something that affects that type of result in terms of methodology? Or is that anything to do with methodology, or really it reflects voter sentiment based on randomization?
Well, his numbers are still okay as far as our survey is concerned. And when we do some analytics, we see that he's still, within range of the top 12. So he's still competitive. I think the main point here is that it's getting to be quite crowded in the top 12.
It's really a tight race.
It's very tight, and someone has to give in, because right now, Congresswoman Camille Villar is already in the top 12, at least in our own survey. So, that's pushing some people out. And that, to your point, Senator Pia Cayetano is also one of the others who are being affected by an upwards movement of Abby Binay, for example. So, there's only so much space. So it's like the law of physics. You can only fit so much inside the space. So someone has to give. And right now, they're the ones who are sliding down in favor of Camille Villar and Abby Binay.
Willie Revillame. also
is
Willie
taking
Villarreal. Spot, yeah.
Right, they're taking
He's
spots
been going up.
from the others. But the red line there shows that, it's still, I wouldn't say anyone's ball game.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're in the top 3, top 4, you're probably, a bit secure.
You're not sure na, yeah. Well, actually, yeah, now that you've mentioned Philip Salvador, I see him 17 to 20 already and very close to Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan. So you're right, in terms of his momentum, there was a big shift. How would you connect the survey results showing former President Duterte's Senate bets gaining momentum, but in another survey recently that just came out yesterday, majority of Filipinos are in favor of making former President Duterte accountable for those who died during the drug campaign. But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. Dr. Guido, how would you connect the recent senatorial preference surveys showing that former President Duterte's Senate bets gained momentum? Whereas just yesterday, there was a recent SWS survey that showed that majority of Filipinos are in favor of holding former President Duterte accountable for the killings related to the anti-drug war.
Well, to be transparent, I haven't seen that survey, although...
yeah, it just came out last night. Like, even the articles are fresh.
Right.
This morning.
It must be very fresh. But to be fair, I think we conducted some probes last year about cooperation with the ICC. And we did see that a slight majority of Filipinos would like to cooperate with the ICC. So I think this question is similar to what we framed last year.
Just the wording is a bit different. The
Right.
phrasing is a bit different.
Right. Cooperation with the ICC, or having former President Duterte being held accountable. For me, there's quite a difference between those questions. But at the same time, I don't see it as a large majority. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 51%. So I think Filipinos favor a judicial process. But of course, Attorney Karen, you as an attorney, you know that former president is not guilty
until proven guilty. Yeah,
right.
Presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Right, he's presumed innocent until now. So having the legal proceedings doesn't mean that they assume that they're prejudging. It could mean that they're just the public just wants the process to be followed, and if he's innocent, he's proclaimed innocent, then he's proclaimed innocent, then good for him, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, at least me as as an individual, that's how I see things naman talaga. If there's like something like an issue, then okay, let's take it to court and then let's settle it there. And if someone's guilty, at least wala na masasabi. After all said and done, then you can say, okay, he's innocent. Or I mean, you would only be concerned if you think the person is.
But I do find this interesting because I don't even know if it's a fair question to ask of a data scientist, because to ask for a correlation between these two surveys results might not be a fair question from the standpoint of a data scientist, because even the time that the data was collected varies, so that we don't know how the recent arrest also affects the perception of fairness, due process by the respondents when we think about accountability. But I think you make a good point that it seems like for Filipinos, majority favor like this whole idea of accountability, wherein regardless, it doesn't really amount to prejudging, but they do want to see the justice system work.
And Attorney Karen, it is fair to ask data scientists these correlations, because that's what we do. So sometimes when I'm sort of looking for answers, it's probably because the correlations I'm seeing are not very strong.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to, frame it in a, more or less neutral way. But yes, we will definitely see in the coming months how this will affect things, because we haven't seen the impact of the ICC arrest. Right now, we're seeing the impact in terms of social media, in terms of noise or movements happening, rallies and protests, voice of support. But this does not translate. I mean, whether this translates to the general public, directly, we will see.
Or to their voter preference.
To their
right?
voter preference, right?
It would be interesting to do. In my head now, I'm thinking like a regression analysis.
Right.
Is there really a statistically significant correlation between that in terms of their idea of accountability and voter preference? And when it comes to what you mentioned earlier, sympathy voting, because you did mention that when we discussed, was there an effect after Vice President Sara Duterte was impeached by Congress? And now with the recent arrest of former President Duterte, a lot of people are wondering, nearing the elections, how would this affect the voter preference and voter sentiment? Have there been historical precedents on sympathy votes? Because for me, as an observer, just very recently in the US, we have Trump 2.0.
Right.
And some people were wondering, is this also related to some sort of sympathy vote? Because leading up to the US elections, he had several cases that were pending in the Supreme Court and even in New York, like so many cases against him. So what is your take on this? Is there any precedent you can think of?
Well, there definitely, former President Noynoy Aquino, I think he benefited from sympathy votes with the passing of former President Cory Aquino. So that's one example. And I think even former Vice President Leni Robredo herself benefited from sympathy votes.
When Jesse, the
Yes.
husband Jesse Robredo, passed away.
Passed away, right. But I think it won't always translate to sympathy votes. So sometimes it's the, how it's framed or the messaging, because sometimes it could be, there could be a bandwagon effect at the same time. Like, if there are more people against a certain person, then more people might, come together and say, okay, that, we're also against that person. What I mean is that, for example, more people might rally against, the former President Duterte is gaining or is seeing some support from the public right now in terms of protests and rallies. But what I mean is that there might be those who are against him, and that might influence other people to take a position against the Duterte family. So I think it can work both ways. So to your point, yes, we have seen examples of sympathy votes. And maybe even President Trump is a beneficiary of that. But how that will affect, I guess it depends. People were speculating that former Senator Laila De Lima, for example, would have sympathy votes if she ran for senator. But based on our pre-election surveys, from last year, she was not polling that high. So maybe whatever happened to her, the filing of cases against her, it happened a long time ago. So it does not translate to sympathy votes. In other words, if it's more recent, then it can definitely add sympathy votes to the person. So if we're talking about the presidential election in 2028, for example, if Vice President Sara Duterte is running, will the impeachment trial right now give her sympathy votes? Maybe that's a long time away.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting you mentioned that, because there was also a survey that came out where the data was taken after Vice President Sara Duterte was impeached by Congress. And this was for the 2028 preferential votes for the position of president. And before, in the past surveys, Senator Raffy Tulfo, and Vice President Sara Duterte were always statistically tied. But in this recent survey, Sara Duterte was suddenly leading by quite a big margin over Senator Raffy Tulfo. So do you think this was also somewhat sympathy votes?
Yeah, that's actually an example of the sympathy votes working for Vice President Sara Duterte. So because of what's been transpiring over the past months, I think she gained some sympathy votes, and that reflected in the survey. So that right now she's leading again in the presidential preference for 2028. But again, the concern from their camp is that it might be too soon, because 2028 is still 3 years away, or let's say 2+ years away. So that by that time, this effect may no longer be visible in 2027, leading up to 2020.
And going back to the senatorial candidates, there are over 60 candidates, and yet only 10 of those aspirants were able to get 100% awareness from the public. But if you look at the mix, it's majority of it is media personalities, the two Tulfo brothers, and then celebrities, Bong Revilla, Dito Lapid, Manny Pacquiao, I guess, counts as also a celebrity apart from being an athlete.
Yeah.
So he is a celebrity by category.
Right.
But then you have public servants like Pia Cayetano, Ping Lacson, Bato de la Rosa, and also Amy Marcos. So what accounts for awareness?
Well,
is it just name recall?
Well, of course, yes. I mean, being in the public eye for a certain period of time brings awareness. Based on data that we have seen, more people watch entertainment compared to news. So the ratio is actually significant. So there are not a lot of, as many people who watch news regularly. I mean, yeah, I know this is a news, so I shouldn't be saying that.
Dapat pala kaya lang yun.
Yeah, that's why they do TikTok. I mean, they're aware of this. That's why, some of their promotions include, something to do with entertainment.
But that's interesting. So at least for those listening, if you're an aspirant, it's good to hear tips from you. So you have done studies, and Filipinos in general watch more entertainment than news.
Yes, entertainment and sports, and I think maybe not just Filipinos, maybe even in the U.S., maybe even Americans. I think it would hold for a lot of cultures or ethnicities. But anyway, so people who have a high awareness are those who are regularly, if they're not actors or celebrities, because if they're actors or celebrities, of course, they will gain awareness because people watch entertainment, and they will always be there in the in the airwaves. But those who are, let's say, politicians who have high awareness, those are politicians who have been around for some time. So I think we can point to, well, of course, let's say Senator Amy Marcos.
Senator Ping Lacson.
Ping Lacson, yeah. He's been around for some time. He's been a senator before, so people are aware of them. So, and that's why, previous politicians, senators, etc., have high awareness because they've been there. But for someone who's relatively new, like Camille Villar, she's raised her awareness significantly compared to last year. So I think a lot of it has been the campaigning and
so
the
campaigning
promotion.
still makes a difference. Campaigning and machinery.
Yes, but of course that's expensive, but it does make a difference.
So resources.
Resources does help a lot. Yes.
Yeah, it helps a lot to raise your awareness level. So at the end of the day, based on our conversation, is being a celebrity or a media personality or an athlete still an advantage when it comes to Philippine politics?
Unfortunately, yes. And our political system reflects that. And, and that's why, I mean, in the U.S. you have senators, but they represent states, so they're like congressmen or something. So they represent certain districts or states. And in our case, if that were the case, then you don't have to be nationally popular.
Yeah.
But since the senators are, they don't represent certain areas, they just represent the whole Philippines. You really need to have high awareness to become a senator. And like you said, or like we said, having the resources helps a lot. But even if you don't, I mean, I remember Doc Willie Ong. I mean, he pulled out of the Senate race. Yeah. I mean, he's not a traditional celebrity, but he made his own mark, by becoming a social media influencer. So,
So I think social media is now a platform.
It's
if
now
you're
a
not
platform.
a celebrity
Right.
and you're not in entertainment, at least you can still make a difference in terms of your awareness level through social media.
Right, and anyone can,
Access it,
can
yeah.
have that access or or influence, and that's why you're seeing now more influencers are leveraging their, if they have millions of followers, they're now leveraging it and either running for positions or endorsing political party lists.
Okay, last question. When can we expect the next survey from OCTA?
Well, right now, with the upcoming elections, our surveys are more or less spaced about 1 month apart. So probably you could say about a month from now or less than a month from now, we'll be talking about the next senator survey. And I think the other survey companies will be doing the same. So it will be interesting to see, the movements, because sometimes it's also all about the momentum, and some who are gaining momentum will carry over.
Okay. And just last night, I saw a survey wherein the trust and approval ratings of President Bongbong Marcos decreased, but the trust and approval ratings of Vice President Sara Duterte increased. So will you also be doing trust and approval rating surveys?
Well, I'll have to check with the team if we have those probes, because right now it's mostly focused on the senatorial lineup. Although, to be fair, I think I saw a glimpse of that survey, and the upward movement of Vice President Sara is only within margin of error. I think it's less than 3% or 2% change. So not that significant, but it's better than a downward movement. So
yeah. Interesting. And again, we don't know how this relates to sympathy votes or the recent event. Thank you so much, Dr. Guido David. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Always a pleasure, Attorney Karen, and good morning.
An obvious shift in voter sentiment is happening, indicated by the rise in the surveys of Senate bets allied with former President Rodrigo Duterte. This despite another survey showing that more than half of Filipinos want the former president to be held accountable for the killings during his term's anti-drug war campaign. With both public opinion and political alliances evolving as the elections draw near, the May election will reveal what the true voter sentiment is. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for meaningful conversations that would help you form an objective personal opinion. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.